calls for calm and transparency after a 13-year-old is shot by police.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Jim Siegel, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Julie Carr-Smythe, State House correspondent for the Associated Press, Derek Clay, Democratic strategist, and Mark Weaver, Republican strategist.
Columbus police promise a full and open investigation, and community leaders demand it after a white police officer shot and killed an African-American 13-year-old boy. Police said Officer Brian Mason shot Tyree King after King pulled a BB gun that looked like a police handgun. Police say King was a suspect in an armed robbery earlier Wednesday night.
We as a community need to come to grips with the fact, with such easy access to guns, whether they're firearms or replicas, there is something wrong in this country, and it is bringing its epidemic to our city streets. And a 13-year-old is dead in the city of Columbus because of our obsession with guns and violence.
And so let's not rush to judgment and frame a narrative based on what's been given to us. Let's find out what those kids were doing, and execution is not the answer to a robbery of a 13-year-old, if there was a robbery.
Jim Siegel, we know few details about this right now, but transparency and the independence of a police investigation is, again, what people are calling for.
Well, this has been a topic that's been debated in Ohio and across the country now for many months since we've started seeing these types of incidents pop up around the country. And in Columbus and in Ohio, as a broader sense, there is still debate over things such as body cameras. I believe that Mayor Ginther he really was hoping that body cameras would be implemented in Columbus before something like this occurred. That did not happen. I understand that they are still working toward that, and by the end of the year, they hope that all officers are, in fact, wearing body cameras. There's talk in the legislature about what to do in terms of either requiring it or setting some kind of guardrails as to what kind of standards you need to put in place. But yes, that's a continuing discussion. Because things like body cameras and they can tell the story. I mean, you don't have to just take someone's word for it. And then there is the independence of the investigation. There's continuing concern about whether a prosecutor can ever really be completely objective when investigating cases involving the police department he has to work so closely with.
Julie, I mean, there have been 13 police-involved shootings this year. I forget how many fatal, 4 or 5 fatal. But when it's a 13-year-old boy, it raises the stakes. But they're not going to go with an independent prosecutor or investigation at this point.
As of right now, they are saying they will conduct the investigation internally. I know that the attorney for Tyree King had said, that's paramount, is to have an outsider do it, because Columbus police can't be trusted necessarily to be objective in this. I suspect that the journalists will be pushing very hard for that to at least be transparent, as you say, even if it's not going to be run outside. So it's, as Jim says, I mean, this really plays up the issue of objective evidence, because of the fact that we had witnesses that said something different than what the actual police said had happened, and therefore here we are, a day and a half, 2 days later, and can't really say for sure what happened.
That's a picture of a replica of the gun that the teenager allegedly had. You can see it's a BB gun, but it looks very, very similar to a police service revolver. Derek, I mean, what is the proper balance here between protecting the community, protecting police officers, and making sure we know what happened here? How does that happen?
Yeah, well, first off, I mean, this is just a really tragic and sad situation. I mean, anytime you have a teenage boy or girl that's caught in the crossfire of police gunfire or community gunfire, it's just not a good situation. This happened in my neighborhood. I have a teenage son, and I can only I can only imagine what those parents are facing. Now, on your question, police and community relations are something that have to be ongoing. I think that there needs to be more training on both sides with the community as well as the police on how to handle, very volatile situations.
Mark, can the police effectively investigate themselves?
Well, they're not. I wrote an op-ed in the Lyman News about this a few weeks ago. The grand jury, which is made up of black and white citizens from Franklin County, will decide whether there should be charges in this case. And they don't work with the police every day.
But
they
the
will make the
prosecutor presents the case.
The prosecutor does present the case, and a grand jury can say, we want to indict when the prosecutor doesn't want to indict, and a grand jury can say, we don't want to indict when the prosecutor does. Every prosecutor is accountable to the people every 4 years. In fact, we're electing prosecutors this year. The city council is accountable, and they're the ones who hire the police. So the citizens have a lot of checks and balances in this system, and the grand jury in this case will be the most important one.
But critics of Ron O'Brien, his opponent mainly, say in his 18 years, not one police officer involved shooting has resulted in charges. All those years. So, just the odds of that, you'd think one would at least be charged. Doesn't that show you that the prosecutor can guide the case if he wants to?
I don't think that's true. Remember, first of all, nearly every time a police officer pulls their weapon is because they believe that someone is about to shoot them or shoot somebody else. And nobody in our audience could look at the gun that you just put up on the screen and in 3 seconds at night know whether that's a real gun that's about to kill you or a BB gun. And remember, the police officer, if they make the wrong decision, they're dead. And so in this case, this was a kid, according to the dispatch reporting, was involved in an armed robbery, and his co-conspirator has said he was robbing people with whatever this gun was.
But Mark, we've seen video evidence in other cases, not this one, but in other cases you talk about they only pull their guns and if they think they're going to get shot. We've seen video evidence where that just isn't the case.
Well, you're thinking about University of Cincinnati cop who got indicted immediately after that and is now facing trial and will go to trial next month.
But there was a case where they had video evidence, and there was also the case of the gentleman outside the store.
Walmart?
And then there was the guy selling the CDs. I'm losing it, forgetting his name.
Yeah, that wasn't, that's right. That was the guy who was being arrested and was not being arrested. He didn't die of a gunshot wound in that case. He died of a chokehold, right?
But we should at least, because some comparisons are being drawn with the Tamir Rice case up in Cleveland, and we should note that there are distinct differences in this case. There was a report of an armed robbery. This was an active pursuit of these suspects. And in the case with Cleveland, there was a call that there had been somebody in a park.
It was a man with a gun call.
Right.
There was just miscommunication between the dispatcher and the police officers.
Right.
I want to get back to what Derek said. This is a tragedy for this family, but it's also a tragedy for this police officer who didn't want to be put in that situation. And the first thing we have to remember is the human cost here for both sides.
According to the dispatch, this is the 4th time he's fired his weapon. And you hear about officers who go through their whole careers not firing a weapon. Does that raise questions?
I think that does raise some questions. We would have to look at the circumstances of what those other shooting instances were, but 4 times does seem like a high amount of reason that you have to use your weapon.
Yeah, I talked to one of our folks who covers police all the time. They say generally, an officer who goes through an entire career and firing his gun twice that's considered to be aggressive. 4 times over 9 years. I can tell you, I know that this is an issue that the police department officials are very aware of, and they know it's going to be a factor in whatever is done here in this case. But look, that's not to say that he wasn't justified in any of these. One of the incidents, in fact, was in 2009 involving a guy with an AK-47 who was spraying bullets and actually shot 2 police officers.
Your assignment. If you're assigned to do the most violent and dangerous work, you're going to wind up pulling your gun more than if you're on traffic patrol.
Okay. Well, this story is far from over, and we'll continue to discuss it and cover it here on Columbus on the Record. To the presidential race, the health of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump has become the latest focus of the presidential campaign. It began after Clinton's near collapse at a 9/11 memorial service in New York on Sunday. She appeared to stumble before getting into an awaiting van. It was later revealed that she had been diagnosed with pneumonia. Yesterday, she returned to the campaign trail after 3 days off.
I'm not great at taking it easy, even under ordinary circumstances, but with just 2 months to go until Election Day, sitting at home was pretty much the last place I wanted to be.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump faced questions about his health from none other than Dr. Oz.
If elected at age 70, you will be the oldest person to ever enter the Oval Office.
Just about the same age as Ronald Reagan, and Hillary's a year behind me. I would say, just based on my life, I mean, I actually, and I don't know if this makes sense, I feel as good today as I did when I was 30.
There you go, Julie. Case closed. 70's the new 30. Donald Trump's healthy. Hillary Clinton's back on the trail. Is this over now?
Oh, I don't think so. The thing is that, and I've heard a lot that of kind of pushback against the media coverage of these issues and making too much of Hillary, making not enough of Hillary, and it made me think that really what you begin to witness in a presidential campaign is something about a person's character. I've talked about that on this show before, but in other words, the reason that there was such a flurry of activity around Hillary's pneumonia was the fact that she had not simply just said,
I'm sick.
I'm sick, and it's 9/11, and hey, let's just leave that to the non-politicians and gone home to bed. In the same way, Trump is still refusing to release anything really documented. He had a pretty frank conversation, I guess, but as you put it, he's really just assessing his own health. I feel great.
Yeah.
And
This whole story is ridiculous to me, to be quite honest. I mean, you got two candidates out there that are shaking thousands and thousands of people's hands. You're on planes all the time. So, yes,
you don't believe Donald Trump has never had a cold in like 30 years? Is that what he? That's what he claimed on the show.
Right. Well, I mean, his doctor jotted down on a napkin that he was fine. But my point is that people get sick. Period. People get sick, and this should not be an issue on the campaign.
Yeah, what happened last weekend is just one issue. Remember, Woodrow Wilson was incapacitated for months, and the country didn't know it. FDR was an invalid behind closed doors. JFK was taking powerful drugs that no one knew about. Hillary Clinton, when she was being interviewed by the FBI, said she couldn't remember some of the briefings she had about classified because of the blood clot in the brain she had, which Bill Clinton said took her 6 hard months to get over. That's a significant injury. The pneumonia, who cares about people getting pneumonia, is the people have a right to know whether or not that blood clot in her brain, which she said caused her to forget classified briefings, is a problem.
But she's been at least transparent about that. Donald Trump hasn't done any of that.
Well, he just released, the first letter was silly. I think we all agree on that. But just the other day, a new letter with all the numbers that I see when my doctor gives me my report of cholesterol and blood pressure and the medicine. So we have much more information in the last week from him than we had before.
Why does this matter? I mean, Mark mentioned that some presidents have been incapacitated. Jim, how much should we know about a presidential candidate's health? They're not in office yet. They're still a private citizen. How much should we know?
Well, I don't think it matters whether they're in office yet or not. They're the only two choices on, one of them is going to be president. So I think it's important, particularly when you have someone who's 70 and someone who's 68, almost 69, running for president. Look, 70 is not the new 30. 70 is, at a certain point, is 70. I mean, in the state of Ohio, once you reach age 70, you can't serve on the Supreme Court anymore. And 2 of our justices are about to find that out this year.
So why don't we have that? You can't be president until you're 35. Why don't we cap the age at 70?
I don't.
It's interesting because 35 at the time, I was working on a story this past week on Victoria Woodhull, who was the first female to be nominated for president, and she's an Ohioan. And at that time, when she was 35, that was middle-aged, and it seemed reasonable at the time that you would have to wait till you're 35, but makes it a short window, I guess.
But tell me this doesn't encapsulate this race, just the way this has all gone down. I mean, she releases all these health records and then gets sick but doesn't disclose it. He releases very little and a joke letter, basically, and then goes on the Dr. Oz show, a TV personality who's been widely criticized over the years for giving out false and misleading medical information, and does his presentation there because it's good TV. There you go. That's how the race we've been running here.
Yeah. It fits right in with Trump, though. I mean, everything is a reality show. He goes on the Dr. Oz show to talk about his health. I mean, everything is superficial with him, and that's what concerns me and a lot of voters in the state.
Remember, Hillary went on Jimmy Kimmel and opened up a bottle of pickles to prove that she wasn't ill. So both of these candidates have been superficial when they wanted to be.
Jimmy Fallon messed up Donald Trump's hair. That's another highlight. In other campaign news, Donald Trump finally agrees that President Obama is an American citizen. And Hillary Clinton brought back memories of Obama's clinging to guns and religion, and Mitt Romney's 47%.
You can put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it.
Mark Weaver, you can say that with pretty good conviction that some Trump supporters are racist and sexist based on the signs we see at rallies and the social media posts. But to go after half of his supporters, that's dangerous for
It's dumb. I mean, Al Sharpton is a racist, and he supports Hillary Clinton, but you don't see Donald Trump saying that all of Hillary Clinton's supporters are as racist as Al Sharpton. This was a dumb thing for her to have said. It was dumb when Mitt Romney said it. Politicians and candidates shouldn't be talking about the composition of the electorate and who votes for who. How about telling us the ideas and what you're going to do when you're in office? They get into this sort of analyst mode or this political strategist mode, and they rarely move numbers. On the thing about the birther thing, I think Trump and his campaign were wrong to talk about that. Mark Penn, who was Hillary Clinton's top strategist, wrote a memo to her in 2008 that their strategy was going to be to prove that Barack Obama was not an American, in his words. Both of them were wrong on the issue. It's a dumb issue. It's not what most voters care about.
I agree that I would not have used the word deplorables. But I mean, Donald Trump actually has, throughout the whole campaign, has been on this this racist talk about, you know, Mexicans being rapists and talking about all different types of races of people. So this is one instance where Hillary was on the campaign trail and talked about, you know, his supporters being deplorables, but it doesn't even measure up to what Donald Trump has been saying throughout the whole election.
If you look at the polls here in Ohio, Donald Trump has eked ahead, and according to the average of polls. The Real Clear average shows Donald Trump with a 1-point lead. The last couple of polls, Jim Siegel, have Trump up by 4 and 5 points. He's got no organization here, widely criticized, yet he's leading Hillary Clinton in Ohio.
Clearly, Ohio's getting more deplorable. I don't have a good explanation other than she's had a rough, I think, couple of weeks with some various things, including this latest remark. I frankly liked it when the fact that she said it by saying what I call the basket of deplorables. Which when has anyone ever used that phrase ever? Basket of deplorables. No one calls anybody that unless you strategically wanted to call them that. And I think it was very deliberate because she wanted people to start talking about the people who support Donald Trump, and then because she knows how the cycle works. Yeah. Eventually, the cycle gets to, well, are they? Is she right? And then they started examining it more, and that's kind of how the story goes. And Trump has benefited from that in some of the things he has said, and now she wanted to do it.
She's playing to her base, which is a sign of a desperate candidate. Now, you said
she though, Mark, she never allows cameras into her fundraisers. She did this time. I think she's going for more independents who say, I don't want to be aligned with these, quote, deplorable people.
This is right at the base. This is, remember, far left people think that Republicans are racist, which is, of course, nonsense. The amount of racists in America are a very small, ignorant faction, and most Republicans are not. But the left thinks it does. So she's playing to her base. Now, you mentioned that there's no Trump organization in Ohio. That's just not true. Now, Hillary's is deeper. But Bob Paduchik, one of the best operatives in the state, is running the Trump organization. He's been given funding. He's been giving resources. And we're starting to see a difference on the ground here in Ohio.
Let me just say, though, on the polls that at this moment, I haven't dug into each and every one, but the ones that I have seen, they tend to sample like Republican plus one kind of a sample. So they presume that Ohio Republicans tend to be more likely to come out to the polls. Yeah. And what's happening in some of these polls is it's not reflecting what I'm hearing on the ground, which is an awful lot of Republicans are going to show up and they're going to not vote for president. They're going to skip that race and vote for the rest of the ticket.
Yeah, listen, this race is really a statistically tied race. When you think about the margin of error, which is, you know, between 1 and 5 points, I mean, Hillary's going to be up one day, Trump may be up on another day. But I think if we are going into this race, if we're about a month and a half out from this race and we're still tied, I think that Hillary is going to win. Now, do I think that she's going to win by a large margin? No. I think this race is going to come down to maybe 2 or 3 percentage points.
All right. The presidential race, of course, is heating up while the U.S. Senate race could be winding down. The latest average of polls show Rob Portman leading Ted Strickland by a whopping 14 points. Strickland says don't count him out. Derek Clay, but down 14 with a month to go, a month and a half to go.
14
That's
points.
tough.
14 points is a large margin, but as we know, a month and a half is an eternity in an election. I think that former governor still has time to raise money to get his message out, but 14 points is a big deficit to overcome.
What's it going to take for him to win?
I think
Strickland.
that for Strickland to win, for one, I think that there needs to be an internal shakeup of his message. You can't run against the other candidate and not share what you want to do for the citizens of Ohio.
Right, and I think that in the case with Strickland that he has been a little bit all over the map in terms of messaging. I think he's tried to listen to too many bosses, I guess, in terms of what he should be saying, where he should be. We've seen many ads pulled. Is it over for him? I don't know, because he has reserved most of his money, the small amount of money he had. He reserved it for these final weeks. He's going to be on the trail with Hillary, and maybe if she has a good operation, those people come out for him.
Mark, Rob Portman's run a really good campaign. Strickland's only hope is perhaps a Trump total implosion.
Yeah, I'm biased. Rob's a friend, and he's been a client of mine. But at this seat a month ago, I said the race was over, and people chuckled. The race is double over. What's going to happen now is Ted Strickland, in order to get noticed, will have to be more desperate. It'll make him less relevant, and he will never run for anything again.
Okay. Our last topic. Do you remember the start of the school year? You get the list of teachers, and there at the top was the one with the worst reputation, the meanest, most humorless, toughest grader in the building. You knew that first report card was going to be ugly. That's exactly how school superintendents around the state felt this week. The State Department of Education released school report cards, and they were not pretty. Schools that once got A's and B's got D's and F's. Jim Siegel, what's going on? Are we all terrible school districts around the state or what?
Yeah, we've gone from school districts have gone from being Lake Woebegone to Lake Woe is me. I think we're gone are the days where 75% of the school districts are getting A's and B's, which is what we had not too long ago, just a short 2 or 3 years ago. The standards have gone up, the cut scores. We've now changed tests. This year they had to take. Last year they took the third different tests in 3 years. So there have been a lot of changes and uncertainty there. But look, the bar is higher, and the State Department of Education is not apologizing for it, and neither are state legislators. They say we can no longer just say this is good enough. We need to push you further. We need to get you ready for new types of careers, and we have way too many kids who graduate high school and have to do remedial classes in college. We need to get you ready for life after high school, and it's not just good enough to be at these lower levels. But boy, those grades are
will
ugly.
These grades fix the problem?
Well, no. I mean, what you want to make sure, I think the message is this year, is that this is not an apples to apples type of comparison. If you fell from an A or B to a D and an F, that doesn't mean that you just sunk as a district. What it means is that Ohio is beginning to put its whole system in alignment. This has been a many-year process of trying to say this gap that Jim references, where kids are going in and having to do remedial classes in college. That wasn't because That wasn't because they hadn't performed well in high school, necessarily. It was because nobody at the college level was communicating with the high school level and vice versa.
Derek, Columbus City Schools are on the ballot this fall with a levy.
Yes.
They got 4 F's and a D, or 5 F's and a D in these report cards. That can't help their message. Or maybe it says they need more money.
Well, again, as everybody said around the table, I mean, the system keeps changing. Yeah. So, you're putting them on a new system. Now they all of a sudden got D's and F's. Well, there's some other school districts around Central Ohio that got D's and F's as well. So I think that their messaging is going to have to reflect that in a very gentle way to the voters. But I think that the voters of this community realize how important public education is.
All right, it's time now for our off-the-record final parting shots. Mark Reeve, you're up first.
As soon as this election is over, all the talk will turn to who's going to run in 2018 for statewide office in Ohio. The Democrats only have two well-known statewide people. Sherrod Brown, he's going to run for Senate again, and Ted Strickland, who will move back to Washington. They have a very thin bench, and the Republicans will do very well in 2018.
Derek.
With everything that's happening with race relations around the country, the Columbus Foundation a few weeks ago did the big table discussions. I was a part of that discussion, and I think that Columbus, Ohio has a real opportunity to be a leader in race relations and making that a model around the country.
Julie.
The Associated Press has been doing a really interesting investigation into lobbying spending by the prescription painkiller industry. And those stories are going to start to roll out next week, and I think that that'll be a real talking point of the week.
And Jim.
And the community is expressing noticeable frustration about the recent shooting here in Columbus of the 13-year-old boy. However, Lucas Sullivan, a colleague of mine, took note today that in the last couple of municipal elections, turnout in Columbus has been about 10%. So, look, if you want change, you got to come out and try to make it happen.
Amen.
Barring a release of any video in the shooting case, the next piece of information that should shed some light on the shooting is the autopsy report to find out where the young boy was shot. I know the dispatch is fighting for autopsy records to be open. Let's hope that happens with this case as well. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Facebook, Twitter, wosu.org/COTR. For our crew, for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.